The snow lay heavy upon the fjord, blanketing the jagged cliffs and silent halls where once there had been laughter, firelight, and song. The wind carried only echoes now, of axes striking wood, of children shouting in play, of voices raised in mead and feast. All of it gone, swallowed by blood and smoke and time. Erik Thorsson stood at the edge of the ruined longhouse of his fathers. His hands, hardened by winters of exile, brushed the scorched timbers where flames had devoured the roof many years before. The clan banners were gone, the carved dragon posts broken and blackened. Beneath the ash and snow, bones lay scattered still. Some were kin, some were foes. It mattered little. They were all silent. He closed his eyes and heard it again, as he had heard it every night since. The screams, the clash of steel, the roar of fire. The night the Skallen clan had come, axes gleaming, shields red with painted wolves. Erik had been scarcely 16 winters, his arms thin, his beard barely grown. He had fought with a woodcutter's axe, standing shoulder to shoulder with his father, Thorvald, chieftain of the clan. They had cut down many, but there were too many more. He remembered his father's last words, bellowed above the din as he forced Erik toward the trees. Live, live, so that we may rise again. Erik had lived. He had fled into the dark woods, carrying the wounds of failure deeper than those carved into his flesh. For 20 winters he had wandered, a mercenary, a raider under other men's banners, a wolf without a pack. His heart was iron, but it was also hollow. Now, at last, he had returned. The gods had not sent him peace in those years. They had sent him visions. In his dreams he had seen his father's spirit, grim and proud, waiting in the halls of the slain. He had seen the faces of the children who had died that night, their eyes filled with the question he could not answer. Why had he survived when they had not? He had also seen something else. A fire that did not consume but renewed, a banner rising again above the fjord, his clan's dragon head restored, his people walking the land once more. The gods whispered, Odin with his ravens, or perhaps Loki with his tricks, that the fallen could rise, not from death, but from memory and blood. And so Erik stood there now, broad-shouldered, gray streaking his beard, scars marking his arms like runes of fate. He was no longer the boy who had fled. He was a man tempered by exile, a warrior of many battles. He carried at his hip an axe taken from a fallen berserker, its blade black with age and inscribed faintly with runes no smith had carved by mortal hand. I will not let it end here, he muttered into the cold wind. His breath rose in white puffs, drifting into the night. By my blood, by the gods, by the bones beneath this earth, I will raise the clan again, even if it takes all that I am. The fjord gave no answer, only the whisper of snow across stone. Erik set to work. First he cleared the ruins, dragging broken timbers aside, piling bones into mounds and raising stone markers. He lit a fire in the longhouse hearth for the first time in 2 decades, though its roof was gone and stars looked down upon the flame. He spoke the names of the dead into the smoke, his voice breaking though no ears but the gods could hear. Then he went into the villages beyond the fjord. Some spat at him, calling him ghost son of a dead clan. Others feared him, for his name was still remembered, though twisted into tale and warning. The last of the dragon clan, cursed by the gods. But there were a few, broken men, widows of war, outcasts like him, who listened. Slowly, Erik gathered them. A dozen at first, then 2 dozen. They were not warriors of legend. They were scarred, hungry, hardened by sorrow. But when they sat by his fire and heard him speak of the dragon clan reborn, their eyes burned with something fierce. You cannot rebuild what the gods themselves have broken, one old man warned him, his face gaunt, his hands shaking. Erik only looked at him with iron in his gaze. The gods do not build. The gods only watch. Men build, and men can build again. It was not only men he sought. Erik climbed the mountain paths to the cairn of the Volva, the old seeress who had lived longer than any living soul remembered. She was blind, her eyes white as milk, but she saw more than most. You walk a doomed path, Erik Thorsson, she rasped when he laid his plea before her. The dead do not rise, and what is lost cannot be unlost. Then I will not raise the dead, Erik said. His voice trembled, not with doubt, but with the weight of his resolve. I will forge new life from what remains. I will call my people back from the wind and wave. And if the gods strike me down for daring, then let them know I did not kneel." The Volva's lips curled in a smile, toothless and sharp as frost. The wolf without a pack seeks to birth a pack anew. Very well, I will give you this. The gods will not stand idle. If you seek to raise your clan, you will draw their gaze. And with their gaze, trial. For the Norns do not like threads rewoven. Erik bowed his head. Then I will face them. She reached out with clawed fingers and traced runes in ash upon his brow. Go then, wolf. But know this. Each stone you lay, each life you bind to your cause, will be bought with blood. Loss will follow you like a shadow, and when you stand at the end, you will not stand whole. Erik met her sightless eyes. I have not been whole since that night. And with that, he turned back toward the fjord, where the first sparks of firelight gleamed against snow. Where once there had been nothing but ruin, now there was the faintest murmur of life again. It was only the beginning. Winter bit hard that year, gnawing at flesh and bone, but within the ruined fjord there was firelight again. Erik's people, no longer just wanderers, but something like a clan, huddled around it. They patched holes in the walls of the old longhouse with hides, carved new benches from driftwood, and spoke names to one another as though the sound alone could weave them into kin. But kinship is not fed by words alone. Hunger gnawed sharper than wolves, and the fjord was barren after years of abandonment. If they were to survive, they needed more than fire. They needed food, weapons, wealth. They needed fear to keep rivals from crushing them before they could stand. Erik knew what must be done. He rose one night, standing before the dozen men and women who had sworn to follow him, the fire casting his scarred face into harsh relief. His axe gleamed faintly, the old runes upon it whispering in the smoke. "This place was ours," he said, his voice low but fierce. "Taken from us by fire and axe. The gods did not save us. No kings came to aid us. Only the bones of our kin lie here still. If we are to rise again, it will not be by waiting. It will be by taking. As the wolf takes. As the sea takes. As life itself takes." A murmur ran through them. Some nodded, eyes bright with hunger for vengeance. Others looked down, fearing what would follow. Erik's gaze swept over them like a blade. "Tomorrow, we raid." They struck first at a merchant's village across the fjord, a settlement fat with trade and unguarded in winter. Erik's band numbered only 24, but they moved with the silence of wolves on snow. The first watchman never cried out. The black axe split his skull before he could raise his horn. Then they swept through the town like storm. Men fell, some screaming, some with blades half drawn. Fires rose. Erik moved at the front, his axe biting, his shield splintering. He felt alive again in the chaos, though each scream stabbed at the hollow in his chest where kin once had been. When it was done, when blood soaked the snow and flames devoured the storehouses, Erik stood in the center of the ruined village, chest heaving, eyes burning. His people dragged sacks of grain, kegs of mead, blades, and coin back toward their boats. One boy, scarcely older than Erik had been the night his clan fell, knelt in the snow, hands raised, his face streaked with tears. Erik's hand trembled on his axe. He saw Arn, his younger cousin, who had died in fire long ago. He saw himself. The axe wavered. For a heartbeat, he could not move. "Kill him," snarled one of his men, a hard-faced outlaw who had lost his family to famine. "Leave none who might raise vengeance." Erik's jaw clenched. Slowly, he lowered the axe. "No," he said, his voice like iron. "The boy lives." Murmurs rippled through the band. Some scowled, others looked away, but none challenged him. Erik stepped forward, seizing the boy by the arm and dragging him up. The child's wide eyes stared into his scarred face. "If you want vengeance," Erik told him, "come find me when you are grown. If not, live as I did. That is curse enough." The boy fled into the smoke. That night, the raiders feasted for the first time since they had sworn themselves to Erik. Mead warmed their bellies, roasted meat filled their mouths, and laughter cracked the longhouse rafters like it had in years long gone. For a moment, the dragon clan lived again. But Erik sat apart, his hands still stained with blood, his eyes distant. He thought of the boy, of the look in his eyes. He knew what seed he had planted. Perhaps an enemy. Perhaps something else. Days passed. Word of the raids spread quickly, carried by traders and whispers. Some called the reborn clan wolves. others called them ghosts. Fear returned to the fjord's name, and with fear came strength. Drifters and outcasts trickled in, swelling their numbers to nearly 50. But with strength came enemies. A messenger arrived one gray morning, clad in the red-marked furs of the Skallen, the very clan that had destroyed Erik's people 20 winters ago. He stood tall, though his eyes flicked nervously at the scars and weapons of those who now filled the longhouse. "I bring word from Jarl Stigandr of the Skallen," the man declared. "You are to leave this fjord at once. It belongs now to the Skallen. If you stay, you will be put to the axe." Erik rose slowly from the high seat, his shadow long in the firelight. The hall fell silent as he strode forward. His axe gleamed faintly in his hand. "Tell your Jarl," Erik said, voice low but sharp as steel, "that this fjord was paid for in blood long before his name was ever spoken. Tell him it is ours, and ours it will remain. And tell him this: if he wishes to see it for himself, he will find me waiting." The messenger blanched, but Erik seized him by the shoulder, dragging him toward the door. "Go," he growled, shoving him into the snow. "Run back to your wolf king." The man fled. When the door closed again, Erik turned to his people. "The Skallen will come. Perhaps tomorrow, perhaps a moon from now. When they do, we will not kneel. We will fight. And this time, we will not break." A roar answered him. Shields banged, voices shouted. The longhouse shook with defiance. That night, as snow fell silent outside, Erik dreamed again. He saw his father, Thorvald, standing in a hall of shadows, a great feast laid before him. The old chieftain's eyes were proud, but sorrowful. "You walk a hard road, son," Thorvald said. "Each step you take will cost you. The gods do not let men remake what has been broken." "Then let the gods curse me," Erik answered in the dream. "I will not let us die." His father said nothing more, only raised a horn in salute, and the dream faded into the howl of wolves. When Erik woke, the fire was low, his people slept around him, and the fjord was silent once more. But in the silence, he heard it still. The gods were watching, and the Skallen were coming. The fjord froze under winter's grip, the sea groaning with ice. Weeks passed with no sign of the Skallen. The dragon clan, small, ragged, but burning with new life, trained daily upon the snow. Shields clashed, axes sang against posts, and voices roared oaths to gods who no longer listened. Erik's word was iron. He led them in every drill, his voice carrying across the fjord like thunder. He taught the young to raise shields, the women to throw spears, the outcasts to fight as a pack. They were no longer drifters. They were wolves gathering to strike. Still, at night Erik's dreams grew darker. Each time, he saw his father in the shadow hall, the same sorrow in his eyes. Sometimes he saw his mother, her hands reaching but never touching him. And once, only once, he saw something else. A great raven with eyes like fire, perched upon a spear. It spoke no words, but its gaze pierced his soul. When he woke, he knew. Odin was watching. The Skallen came with the thaw. At dawn, horns sounded from the mouth of the fjord. Longships rode swift and silent, their dragon heads cutting through the gray mist. 3 ships, their shields painted blood-red, their sails heavy with frost. Upon the prow of the lead vessel stood a tall man in mail, his beard white as snow, his eyes like a wolf's. Jarl Stigandr himself. The longhouse emptied. Men and women gathered upon the shore, shields ready, spears trembling in their hands. Erik stood at their front, his axe in hand, his breath steaming in the chill air. "They come for us," he said, his voice carrying over the icy waves. "For what we have rebuilt, for what they thought they had destroyed. They think us weak. They think us broken. Show them today that we are neither. Show them the dragon clan lives." A roar rose from the shore. Shields banged, voices thundered. The Skallen heard it across the water, and their own horns answered. The first clash came at the strand, as Skallen warriors leapt from their ships into the shallows. Shields locked, spears thrust. The air filled with the ring of steel, the crunch of bone, the spray of blood upon snow. Erik was in the thick of it, his axe biting deep, his shield splintering under blows. He fought like the storm, each strike fueled by rage and memory. Beside him, Gunnar, broad-shouldered, loud-voiced, his truest friend since boyhood, laughed as he cleaved through foes. "For the dragon," he roared, blood streaking his beard. The dragon clan held, though they were outnumbered 2-1. They fought with the desperation of wolves cornered, the fury of people who had nothing left to lose. For every clansman that fell, 2 Skallen were dragged down into the surf. Then Styginder came ashore. The Jarl moved like age had not touched him, his great sword flashing, his shield heavy as a wall. Where he strode, men fell. He cut a path straight toward Erik, his eyes fixed, cold as the fjord itself. "Thorsson," he bellowed, his voice a challenge. "I killed your father. I burned your kin. And I will end you, as I ended them." The world narrowed to the 2 of them. Erik stepped forward, blood dripping from his axe, his breath ragged. Around him the battle roared, but he heard nothing but his own heartbeat. "Then come," Erik growled, "and see if you can kill a ghost." They met with a clash that shook the shore. Erik's axe rang against Styginder's shield, sparks flying. The Jarl's blade cut the air, driving him back. Again and again they struck, each blow heavy enough to fell a lesser man. Around them, men paused in their fighting, drawn by the duel of chiefs. Erik staggered once, Styginder's blade grazing his side, blood blooming across his tunic. Pain flared, but he did not fall. He thought of his father, of his mother, of every face lost to the fire that night. Rage steadied his hand. With a roar, he struck. His axe shattered the rim of Styginder's shield, bit deep into the wood. The Jarl snarled, wrenching free and driving his sword toward Erik's chest. And then Gunnar was there. The great bear of a man slammed his shield into Styginder, driving the Jarl back. "Not today, Wolf King," Gunnar bellowed, raising his axe. But the Jarl's sword flashed quick as lightning, piercing Gunnar's side. The laughter died in his throat. Blood spilled across the snow. "No," Erik roared, but Gunnar only grinned through the blood on his lips. "Finish it," he rasped. Erik's rage broke like a dam. He swung with all his strength, his axe cleaving through what remained of Styginder's shield, tearing into his shoulder. The Jarl staggered, his blade dropping, his roar turning to a gurgle. With another strike, Erik felled him, the great Wolf King crashing into the surf, blood staining the waves. A cheer rose from the dragon clan. The Skallen faltered, their leader fallen, and the wolves became prey. They broke, fleeing back to their ships, dragging the dying with them. The dragon clan stood bloodied, broken, but victorious. Erik fell to his knees beside Gunnar, cradling his friend as the life faded from his eyes. The big man smiled still, even as his breath rattled. "Do you see, Erik?" he whispered. "The dragon lives." And then he was gone. The victory feast that night was hollow. They had driven back the Skallen, slain their Jarl, reclaimed honor and blood. But at the high seat, Erik sat alone, his friends drinking horn upon the table, untouched. Around him his people laughed, sang, drank deep. Yet his heart was heavy as stone. The cost was clear. For every step forward, blood would be paid. For every gain, a loss. The gods were not finished testing him. And in the silence between voices, Erik thought he heard wings. A raven's wings, circling in the dark above the longhouse. Watching, waiting. Spring thawed the fjord, melting the ice into rushing streams that carried the blood of battle into the sea. Word of the dragon clan's victory spread like wildfire through the north. Merchants whispered of a reborn clan that had slain Jarl Styginder and cast down the Skallen's pride. Outlaws, broken warriors, and wanderers came from far lands to swear themselves to Erik. Soon the longhouse rang with voices once more. Fires blazed, feasts were held, and the fjord's empty silence was gone. 100 strong now, the dragon clan rebuilt walls, carved new ships, and raised spears beneath their black and red banner. Yet even as strength gathered, Erik felt the emptiness beside him. Gunnar's laughter no longer filled the air. The high seat at his right hand stood vacant. And every night, when silence fell, Erik saw his friend's blood on the snow, his smile fading into shadow. The gods were not silent either. One evening, as the clan feasted to mark their new strength, a wanderer entered the hall. Cloaked in rags, face hidden in shadow, he walked with the limp of age. The laughter fell silent as he crossed the firelit hall, leaning on a staff carved with runes. Erik rose, hand on his axe. "Who comes unbidden to my hall?" The man's head lifted. His one eye gleamed like a star. A raven's feather was bound in his cloak. "I come to see the ghost who would make the dead walk," the wanderer said. His voice was deep, rich, and carried weight beyond mortal men. A hush fell. None dared speak the name aloud, but all knew it. Erik's hand tightened on his axe. "If you have come for mockery, old man, you will find my axe quicker than my tongue." The wanderer smiled faintly. "I have not come for mockery. I have come to see if you understand the path you walk." Erik's jaw clenched. "I understand this much. My clan lives again. That is all that matters. Lives. The man's one eye burned brighter. You call this life? Ghosts clinging to fire, bones stitched with vengeance? Beware, Erik Thorsson. The Norns weave a hard fate for those who would defy the threads already cut." The hall was silent, every ear straining. Erik's voice was low but fierce. "If the Norns cut my kin's threads too soon, then let me weave them anew. I will not bow to fate." The wanderer's smile widened, though sorrow lingered in it. Proud words, dangerous words. Even kings have fallen for less. He leaned closer, his breath smelling of smoke and sea. "But perhaps you will be tested yet." And with that, the old man turned and walked from the hall. No door opened, no step touched snow. He was gone, as if swallowed by the firelight. Whispers rippled through the clan. Some swore it was Odin himself, come to warn them. Others muttered curses and crossed themselves, fearing the Allfather's wrath. Erik said nothing. He sat long into the night, staring at Gunnar's empty horn, the wanderer's words echoing in his skull. The next raid was bloodier. They struck a wealthy settlement inland, where thralls worked iron under the lash of cruel masters. Erik's men freed the thralls, slew their oppressors, and dragged away carts heavy with ore and gold. Victory seemed theirs, until the ambush came. A Skalan war band, thirsting for vengeance, struck from the trees. The battle was chaos, steel ringing, arrows hissing, blood spilling on spring grass. Erik fought like fire, but even fire cannot shield all. A Skalan spear struck Leif, the young man Erik had raised from boyhood like a brother. The lad fell with a cry, eyes wide with shock. Erik roared, cutting down the spearman, but when he turned, Leif's breath was already fading. "Brother," Leif gasped, blood spilling from his lips. I fought well." Tears burned Erik's eyes. He grasped Leif's hand, squeezing it tight. "Like a dragon, little brother. Like a dragon." And then Leif was gone. The dragon clan won that day, but their laughter was dim. They buried Leif on the hill overlooking the fjord, stones raised high to mark his grave. Erik stood there long after the others had gone, the sea wind whipping his hair, his axe heavy in his hand. How many more? He thought. How many must I lose before the clan lives again? That night, he dreamed once more. His father stood in the shadow hall, eyes sorrowful. But now others were there. Gunnar, smiling faintly, and Leif, his young face pale as moonlight. "You see," Thorvald said softly, "the price is blood. Always blood." Erik shook his head, fist clenched. "Then let it be mine. Take me. Spare the rest." But his father only looked at him with pity, and the hall faded into the sound of ravens' wings. When Erik woke, the fire was low, the hall silent. His people slept around him, their faces weary with battle, with grief. He looked at them, each face carrying hope, fear, defiance. They followed him because he gave them reason to live. And yet each step forward seemed to carve another name into the stones of the dead. Still, Erik rose, tightening his grip on his axe. "Let the gods curse me," he whispered into the firelight. "I will not stop. The dragon clan will live." And outside, unseen in the dark, a raven stirred its wings. Summer came to the fjord with long days and restless nights. The sun barely dipped below the horizon, painting the water in endless fire. Ships were carved, sails mended, and the dragon clan grew restless. The taste of victory and blood lingered on their tongues. They hungered for more. It was Erik who gave voice to it first, standing before them on the strand as the sea whispered against the shore. "We are no longer beggars," he said. "No longer ghosts clinging to a dying fire. We are wolves once more, dragons risen from ash. But if we stay here, we will wither. A tree cannot grow in shallow soil. We must take more, lands, ships, silver, thralls. We must show the north that the dragon clan lives." A roar answered him. Shields beat, axes struck wood. The hunger in their eyes was no longer only for survival, but for glory. And so they sailed. Their raids grew bolder. No longer did they strike only small villages or lonely farms. They raided coastal halls, took ships at sea, clashed with warriors under the banners of rival jarls. Each victory brought gold and fear. Each defeat carved new scars, but they always returned with more than they had left with. Erik stood at the prow of every ship, his black axe in hand, his eyes like storm. Tales spread of him: Erik the Ghost, Erik the Wolf Slayer, Erik Dragonborn. Children whispered his name. Jarls cursed it. Skalds began to weave songs that carried across the north. But even as his fame grew, so too did the shadow above him. The raven followed. Wherever they went, high above the sails or perched upon the masts, the black bird watched. Sometimes it spoke in his dreams, though its words were never clear. Sometimes he thought it whispered of doom, sometimes of glory. Always it watched. Law stalked him as closely as fame. In the raid upon Jortholm, the dragon clan fought a battle that nearly broke them. Their ships rammed against the foe in a storm, lightning splitting the sky. Erik himself slew the enemy's chieftain in the rain, his axe blazing with fury. But in the chaos, Astrid, fierce Astrid, who had been among the first to swear herself to him, was struck down by a spear through the heart. Erik pulled her body from the surf himself, laying her upon the deck as thunder roared overhead. Her eyes were wide, her lips pale. She had been like a sister, a shield at his side since the beginning. Another stone for the cairn. He roared that night, standing upon the deck, salt and rain mingling with tears. His voice carried above the storm. Is this the price, All-Father? Will you bleed me of all I love until nothing remains but steel? The thunder gave no answer but its echo. When they returned, they raised a mound for Astrid beside Gunnar and Leif. Stones rose upon the hill, each name carved deep. Each time Erik stood there, the weight grew heavier. He felt the chain of the dead dragging at his soul. Yet still he pressed on. In autumn, their sails carried them farther still. They struck at Gotland, at Saxon traders, at monasteries rich with gold. The dragon clan grew wealthy, fierce, their name a storm that swept the seas. But in their greatest raid yet, Erik saw a vision that shook him. It came on the Isle of Skuld, where they stormed a temple said to belong to the Norns themselves. The defenders fought like men possessed, but they fell one by one before the fury of the dragons. Erik himself drove his axe into the temple doors, shattering them wide. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and fate. 3 women sat upon carved thrones, their hair white as snow, their eyes blind but seeing. The Norns, Ord, for dandy, Skuld. Erik froze. Around him, his men fell silent, their weapons lowering. The air was thick as iron, heavy with power. The eldest of the 3 turned her blind eyes upon him. Her voice was like the sea against stone. Erik Thorsson, son of Thorvald, ghost of the dragon clan, do you know what you seek? Erik's voice trembled, though his hand gripped his axe. I seek to rebuild what was lost, to make my clan live again. The second sister's voice was soft as wind. You seek to weave threads already cut. The third's voice was sharp as ice. And every thread you weave costs blood. You cannot revive the dead without killing the living. Erik's chest heaved. Rage burned in him, but so too did fear. Then let the blood be mine, he said. If fate demands it, let me pay the price. The 3 sisters spoke as one, their voices thundering. You will pay, but it will not be enough. For every life you save, another shall be taken. For every name you raise, another shall fall. And in the end, Erik Thorsson, the dragon will live, but you will not. The hall shook. Fire flared. And then the temple was empty, the thrones bare, the women gone. Erik fell to his knees, his axe clattering to the stone. Around him, his men whispered in fear, some crossing themselves, others spitting to ward off doom. When Erik rose, his face was carved with iron. So be it, he said. If my blood is the price, then I will pay it. The dragon will live. But in the silence that followed, even he could not shake the cold weight pressing upon his heart. That night, he dreamed once more of the Shadow Hall. His father stood there, Gunnar and Leif at his side, Astrid behind them. All stared at him with eyes filled not with anger, but with sorrow. And high above, the raven watched. Winter came early that year, the sea already clawing with ice before the harvest was done. The dragon clan returned from their raids laden with silver, iron, and thralls, their ships groaning with spoils. Fires blazed bright in the longhouse, mead flowed, and laughter rang like thunder. To the world outside, they were strong, unbreakable. But inside, shadows grew. Erik sat upon the high seat, the black axe across his knees, his eyes scanning the hall. His people drank deep, but he saw the cracks forming. Men boasting of their own glory, women whispering of what price the gods demanded, outlaws snarling that too much silver was kept aside for clan coffers. Strength brought envy. Wealth brought greed. And where greed took root, betrayal was never far. One night, a man named Hakon, broad-shouldered and sharp-tongued, rose from the benches. He had fought beside Erik since the first raids, his axe always red with blood. But now his eyes burned with something colder. "You speak of the dragon clan as though you are its heart, Erik Thorsson," Hakon said, his voice loud enough for all to hear. "But who made you Jarl? Who gave you the right to sit that seat? We all bled. We all fought. Yet you take the choicest share, you hold the high seat. You keep the gods' favor as though it were yours alone." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Erik rose slowly, the axe heavy in his hand, his shadow long in the firelight. His voice was quiet, but it cut sharper than steel. "I did not take this seat. I earned it. By blood, by fire, by sacrifice. When others fled, I stood. When others wept, I fought. And I fight still. Do you?" Hakon's jaw tightened, but his gaze did not falter. "I fight, but I will not fight for a man cursed by the Norns themselves. We all heard the whispers. We all know your doom. Why should we bleed for a Jarl whose fate is to fall?" The hall stilled. Eyes turned from Hakon to Erik. The silence was heavier than any spear. Erik's heart thundered, but his face was carved from stone. He raised the black axe, its runes glimmering faintly in the firelight. "Because even cursed, I stand before you still. And when the Skallen came, who cut down their Jarl? When Jordholm fell, who led the charge? When silver filled our halls, whose axe made it so? Mine." He stepped closer, the axe poised. "If you think you can lead better, Hakon, take the seat. Now, challenge me, and see if the gods favor you." The fire roared. The silence stretched. Hakon's hand twitched on his axe haft, but he did not move. His eyes dropped. Slowly, he stepped back into the shadows, his defiance swallowed. But Erik saw the seed planted. It would grow in darkness. That night, as the clan feasted again, Erik drank little. He sat in silence, his eyes upon the rafters where the raven perched, watching with its fire-bright eye. "Is this your weaving?" Erik muttered under his breath. "Must I fight my own, as well as my foes?" The raven gave no answer. It only stared. Soon after, omens came. In the deep of winter, the sea froze farther than any living man remembered. Wolves prowled the hills in packs larger than armies. One night, the aurora blazed blood-red across the sky, and the people whispered of Ragnarok. Dreams plagued Erik. He saw the Shadow Hall, but it was fuller now. So many faces, each one he had lost. Gunnar, Astrid, Leif, his father. They said nothing, only stared, their eyes filled with sorrow. And then he saw the Norns again. They wove threads of blood and smoke, their blind eyes fixed upon him. "You walk swiftly to your end, Erik Thorsson," they intoned. "Your clan rises, but you fall. The dragon will live, but only in ash and memory." He roared at them in the dream, his axe raised high. "Then I will burn the loom itself. I will cut your threads with my steel." But they only smiled, and the dream faded to raven's wings. When Erik woke, he knew the truth. His fate was not his to change, only to endure. Still, he rose, donned his cloak, and strode into the snow. His people followed him still. Betrayal whispered, doom loomed, but the dragon clan lived. And as long as they lived, he would fight. The snows had not yet melted when betrayal came. It began with whispers. Hunters gone missing in the woods. Supplies vanishing from the storehouses. Men slipping away in the night. At first, Erik thought it the work of wolves, or hunger, or fear. But soon the truth revealed itself like rot beneath a wound. Hakon, the man who had once stood shoulder to shoulder with him, who had spat defiance in the hall, now drew men to his cause in secret. Promises of richer raids, of freedom from Erik's curse, of a new order where no man bent the knee to one doomed by fate. He spoke to those who grumbled of silver withheld, to widows who blamed Erik for their husbands' deaths, to warriors who hungered for a Jarl who was not bound to a prophecy. It was not long before steel spoke louder than whispers. One bitter dawn, The gates of their stronghold shuddered to the crash of axes. Erik was roused by the alarm horns, his breath smoking in the cold as he seized his black axe and rushed to the walls. There, through the swirling snow, he saw them, his own men, their shields raised, their faces twisted with rage and desperation. Hakon led them, his eyes burning like coals, his voice carrying over the storm. Down with the cursed Jarl. The gods have abandoned him. Follow me, and we will carve our own fate. The loyalists roared their answer from the ramparts, arrows hissing down. The gates shook as rams struck. Blood spilled in the snow. Erik's heart clenched, not with fear, but with grief. He had fought kings, clans, beasts from the sea itself, but never had he thought to fight his own kin, his own blood brothers. Yet here they stood, spears in hand, eager to cut him down. He raised the black axe, its runes glowing faintly, as though fed by the storm. His voice boomed across the walls. Hakon, you betray not me, but all we bled for. You betray the dragon itself. Hakon's grin was cruel. Better to betray a dragon than to follow one into doom. The gates splintered. The battle within the stronghold was chaos, kin against kin, shield against shield. The longhouse that had rung with laughter now rang with screams. Fires caught, smoke choking the rafters. Erik fought like a storm-made flesh. His axe tore through mail and bone, his cloak soaked red. Yet with every foe he felled, another rose. Men he had once shared bread with, men who had once sworn oaths to him. And still, the raven circled above, crying its harsh, fateful song. By nightfall, the stronghold was half burnt, its streets slick with blood. Erik stood amidst the ruin, his breath ragged, his body torn with wounds. Around him, his loyal few remained, battered but unbroken. The rest lay dead or had fled with Hakon into the dark woods. The dragon clan lived still, but it was maimed. Broken, Erik staggered into the longhouse, its timbers charred, its benches shattered. He sank onto the high seat, his axe heavy in his lap. His eyes burned, not from smoke, but from sorrow. So much lost. Again, Astrid's voice echoed in his memory, soft as a dream. A clan is not only blood. It is the fire you pass to others. He clenched his fists. Yes, though half of his people had turned, though his hall lay in ruin, though fate's hand pressed hard upon his shoulder, he would not let the fire die. He rose, his shadow long in the firelight. We rebuild, he told the survivors. His voice was hoarse, but it carried steel. We bury our dead, and we rebuild. The dragon will not fall while I draw breath. And so they began again. Through the bitter months that followed, they raised walls anew, carved ships from frozen timber, bound themselves tighter with oath and sacrifice. But Erik knew their strength was fading. Betrayal had cut them deep. And beyond the walls, Hakon gathered his outlaws, forging them into a new clan, hungry for vengeance. Erik dreamed again of the Shadow Hall. It was fuller still, the faces beyond counting. And this time, the Norns did not wait for him. They spoke as soon as he stepped into the gloom. The dragon's fire flickers, they said, their voices a hiss of wind through dead trees. You hold it aloft, but soon it will consume you. And when it does, only ashes will remain. Erik roared at them, his teeth bared. Let it consume me, then, but my people will live. The Norns only smiled, and the raven's cry woke him to another gray dawn. Spring thawed the ice, but not the blood spilled in winter. Erik led his people out of the charred stronghold and into the wilds, seeking wood for ships and pasture for their few surviving herds. But everywhere he went, he saw Hakon's mark. Villages burned, trade routes seized, thralls stolen in the night. Hakon's outlaws had become a clan of their own, hardened by hunger, sharpened by rage. The land could not hold them both. So Erik gathered what strength remained. He called the oaths of men still loyal, forged blades from the last of their silver, raised sails stitched from scavenged cloth. The dragon clan, wounded but not slain, once more took to the sea. But war followed them back to shore. It was in the valley of Galdvik, where mist curled like serpent breath and the river ran black from the melt. Erik marched at the head of 50 loyal warriors, his black axe gleaming in the pale sun. At his side strode Runa, her shield painted with the dragon's mark, her eyes bright with unshaken fire. Across the field, Hakon waited. His force was twice their number, outlaws and deserters bound together by greed and spite. His laughter carried over the valley as he raised his sword, scarred and rusted but deadly still. "Look, brothers," he cried. "The cursed Jarl comes to die. Let us cut his thread and claim our freedom." His men roared. Erik only tightened his grip on the axe. His voice was low, but his warriors heard it clear. "We stand for more than freedom. We stand for fire, for kin, for the dragon that will not die. If this is the day we fall, then let the world remember how we fell." The two forces clashed like thunder meeting stone. Shields splintered, spears shattered, blades rang against bone. Blood soaked the thawing earth, steam rising in the chill air. The dragon clan fought like wolves cornered, every man and woman striking with the fury of the doomed. Erik sought Hakon through the melee, the black axe carving a path. The outlaw lord fought like a berserker, cutting down 3 men with a single sweep, his laughter wild, his eyes aflame. When at last they met in the heart of the battle, the world seemed to hush. "Brother," Hakon sneered, "shall we end it?" Erik's only answer was the swing of his axe. Steel rang against steel, sparks flying. They circled, each blow echoing like a drumbeat of fate. Hakon struck hard, fueled by hate. Erik struck harder, fueled by grief. Around them, men died, but neither gave an inch. At last, Hakon's blade caught Erik's shoulder, biting deep. Pain roared through him, blood soaking his cloak. Hakon grinned, pressing harder. "The Norns curse you, Erik. You will drag them all down with you." Erik bared his teeth. With a roar, he twisted, his axe cleaving through Hakon's guard. The blade bit deep into his chest, splitting mail, splitting bone. Hakon staggered, shock freezing his face. Erik leaned close, his breath hot with rage. Better cursed and loyal than free and faithless. He wrenched the axe free. Hakon collapsed into the blood-soaked earth, his laughter dying in his throat. The outlaws faltered. Leaderless, they broke, scattering into the mists. The dragon clan stood bloodied but unbowed, their enemies slain or fled. But victory came at a cost. Of Erik's 50, less than 20 still stood. Runa was among them, her shield broken, her arm cut to the bone, but her eyes still burning bright. She looked to Erik, who swayed on his feet, blood dripping from his wounds. "You live," she said. It was half a statement, half a prayer. "For now." Erik rasped, his strength nearly gone. They carried their dead from the valley, laying them upon pyres that burned high into the night. The smoke rose to the stars, and the raven circled above, its cry sharp as the crack of fate's loom. Erik watched the flames, his body trembling with exhaustion. He had slain his betrayer, avenged the wound upon his clan. But the cost was carved deep. Each victory hollowed them further, each triumph bought with blood too dear. And still the Norn's words rang in his skull. "The dragon will live, but only in ash and memory." He clenched his fists, staring into the fire until his vision blurred. If ash was all they left, then he would make it burn so bright the gods themselves would remember. The valley of Galdvik still stank of smoke and blood when Erik gathered his clan. Their dead were ash, their wounds bound, their spirits weary. Yet a silence clung to them, heavier than grief. A silence born of the truth that their numbers were too few. The dragon clan had survived the fire, but survival was not enough. Erik knew it. He felt it in the ache of his bones, in the weight of the black axe upon his shoulder, in the raven's ceaseless cry above. If he did nothing, if he led them as he had before, the dragon would flicker and die. Not today, perhaps, not tomorrow, but soon. And so, he turned his eyes to the gods. One night, under the frost-laced moon, he called Runa and his fiercest warriors. They climbed the crags of Skelmer's Peak, where legend told that once, long ago, Odin himself had stood to drink the wind and taste the blood of sacrifice. The climb was cruel, the rocks jagged, the snow deep. Men slipped, bleeding, and pressed on. At the summit, where the world fell away to sea and sky, Erik raised his voice to the heavens. "All-Father," he roared, his words carried on the freezing wind. "You who plucked out your eye for wisdom, you who hanged on the tree for power, hear me. I am Erik Thorsson, son of a broken clan, bearer of the black axe, sworn to the dragon. My people dwindle. My fire fades. Grant me the strength to revive my clan, or let me die standing with my hand on steel. His words echoed across the peaks. At first, nothing answered but the howl of the storm. His warriors shifted uneasily, muttering that the gods were deaf, or worse, indifferent. But Erik stood firm, his knuckles white on the axe. Then the wind dropped. The world hushed. Even the raven, perched on a stone, cocked its head and fell silent. And from the darkness, a shape emerged. Cloaked in shadow, tall as a pine, with one eye burning like a star. The other socket was dark as the void. Odin. The Allfather's gaze fixed on Erik, and it pierced him to the marrow. "You call upon me, Erik Thorsson," Odin said, his voice both thunder and whisper. "But do you know what you ask? To defy fate, to raise what is fallen, to kindle fire from ash. These things are not gifts. They are prices." Erik dropped to one knee, though his pride burned. "Then tell me the price. I will pay it." Odin's one eye gleamed. "The Norns have woven your end. To walk against it, you must give more than blood. You must give yourself, your strength, your breath, your life. To save your clan, you must burn as the offering." The words struck like a blade. His life, for theirs. Behind him, Runa cried out. No, there must be another way. But Erik's heart was still. He thought of Astrid, of Leif, of all the faces in the Shadow Hall. He thought of the children who still clung to their mothers, of the young men sharpening blades, of the fire they had carried through every storm. "If that is the price," Erik said, lifting his head, "then I pay it." Odin's shadow smiled, cold and vast. "So be it. The dragon will rise, but you will fall. Your death will be the pillar upon which they stand." The gods' form dissolved into storm and silence. The wind roared again, the snow stung their faces, and the raven shrieked into the night. Erik rose slowly, his body trembling not from cold, but from the weight of what was sealed. His warriors stared at him in awe and horror. Runa shook her head, her face pale. "You cannot give yourself to them. Without you, you will endure," Erik said, his voice iron. "Because of me, because of what I give." He looked out over the sea, endless and black beneath the stars. And for the first time, he felt the loom of fate not as chains, but as fire in his veins. The end would come, but it would come on his terms. Winter's breath returned to the fjord, icy and relentless. The dragon clan, though battered and diminished, gathered once more in the longhouse, their breaths misting in the frozen air. Erik walked among them, his black axe slung over his shoulder, each step heavy not with age, but with purpose. No word was needed. They had felt it in the cold winds, in the raven's unblinking gaze, in the quiet sorrow that had settled in the hall. Their Jarl had seen the threads of fate, and he would not hide from them. Erik spoke to the clan that night, his voice carrying above the crackling fires. "Brothers, sisters," he said, "we have fought through shadow and storm. We have risen from ash and blood, but the price of survival has not yet been paid. I have looked upon the gods, and I know what must be done. To ensure the dragon clan lives, I must give myself." A hush fell over the longhouse. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Runa stepped forward, her shield in hand, her face pale but resolute. "Erik, there must be another way. We can fight. We can rebuild. Let the gods take their anger out on me and the men. Not you." Erik placed a hand on her shoulder. "Runa, all I have built, all I have saved, has been for them. You, the young men and women who will carry our name. I have failed to protect those I loved, and I cannot fail the living. If my life can bind the dragon to this world, then I will pay it gladly." The clan understood. Tears were shed, but not only for the life that would be given. They were tears of honor, of reverence, of love for a man who had carried them through the storm and the shadow. Over the next days, preparations were made. Ships were strengthened, the longhouse fortified, pyres constructed at the cliff's edge overlooking the sea. Erik trained the clan with fierce discipline, knowing that when he gave himself, their courage would be the key to survival. He shared all his strategies, all his secrets, all the wisdom born of fire and blood. And all the while, the raven circled above, its eye like a burning coal, as if marking the hour. The night before the final act, Erik walked alone to the cliff. Snow crunched under his boots, the fjord below black and roaring. He thought of those he had lost, Gunnar, Astrid, Leif. He thought of his father, of the Shadow Hall, of the Norns and their weaving of fate. He closed his eyes. The wind bit at his face, the stars shone cold above, and in his heart, he felt both sorrow and triumph. "I am ready," he whispered to the empty night. The dawn came pale and silent. The dragon clan gathered on the cliff. Erik stood at the edge, his black axe raised high. Pyres blazed behind him, their smoke twisting into the sky like prayers. He spoke once more. "The dragon lives because of all of you. Carry its fire into the world. Keep its name alive." Live. Then, with a final glance at the clan, Erik stepped forward. Fire consumed him, the flames roaring with the power of his will and the sacrifice he bore. The air itself seemed to bend, a great wind lifting from the sea, carrying the scent of salt and iron, the echo of steel, the song of dragons long past. The clan watched, their hearts breaking and yet soaring. They had known this day would come. They had known that the life of one could ensure the survival of many. And as the fire's heat washed over the cliff, they felt it. The dragon lived, bound to the world by Erik's sacrifice. When the flames died, all that remained was ash, blackened and windblown. But the dragon's mark shimmered faintly in the stones, in the snow, in the smoke that rose to the heavens. And the raven cried once, long and piercing, as if to announce the birth of legend. The dragon clan survived. They carried Erik's story, his name, his fire. And every time they raised shields, every time they struck steel in defense of hearth or home, they felt his presence, guiding, guarding, enduring. The price had been paid. The loss had been absolute. But from that loss, life endured.